Okay, I'm really excited about this week because I get to recommend one of my all-time favorites that simply hasn't been available. For a very, very long time, you couldn't stream this show anywhere. It was, you could buy the first two seasons on Amazon, but then they were delisted, and the DVDs have been out of print for about a decade, so good luck finding those. But all of a sudden, I discovered this weekend, it just popped up. 4 seasons of it, in fact, just popped up on Prime Video. So now you can watch it there. I'm not sure why season 5 isn't there, but close enough for jazz. If you enjoy shows, let's just say if you enjoy shows like Castle and Psych, you will enjoy this show that is, along with Moonlighting, is one of the main inspirations for them, and started the whole sort of offbeat detective pairing genre. The offbeat detective thing had been around for a while. I mean, just look at Columbo for an example. But this sort of started the pairing, especially this and Moonlighting sort of started the offbeat duo instead of the detective operating alone, and even the idea that there would be some romantic tension, as you would see on shows like Castle and later that other show with Simon Baker that I can't remember the name of at the moment. That was sort of a ripoff of Psych. But the show was created by Robert Butler, who is not a name most people know, but he should be a legend in the television community, simply for the number of pilots of important shows he directed. I mean, you have Star Trek, Batman, Hill Street Blues, Hogan's Heroes. Let's just say that by the time he got around to creating his own show in this form, he knew the ropes, and he was pretty good at figuring out how to put together an interesting show that would keep viewers tuning in. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't the most groundbreaking show you will ever see. It's very much mystery of the week, but that's the way I like my mystery programs. I don't really like the giant arc ones unless you're doing something like, say, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, where you're not trying to have a new giant mystery every year. It's just a one-off, and you're just doing like 5 to 8 episodes of a one-off complicated mystery that is a slow burner. I prefer having a different mystery with different suspects every week. So the premise of the show is that Laura Holt, played by Stephanie Zimbalist, is a private detective who wanted to branch out and start her own firm. Only trouble, there weren't many customers for a woman working on her own as a private detective. So she invented a male superior, and she went with the most masculine name I think she could come up with, which is the name of a manufacturer of razors and ammunition. And just went with the name Steele for a last name, and just told everyone that he was so famous and, so good at his job that he was just recommending his top detective take over their case because he just doesn't have time to handle it. People bought it and it was working. That is until the pilot episode where she ends up having to protect some jewels from a notorious jewel thief who no one even seems to know the name of. I mean, his real name. He has plenty of assumed names. only to have another jewel thief show up on the spot. And she's trying to protect him from both, only to have the first jewel thief trying to escape Interpol assume the identity of her boss, Remington Steele. And in an uncharacteristic move for a jewel thief, he actually manages to help her keep the jewels from being stolen. Just one major problem for Laura, and that is he manages to do it while getting himself photographed and videotaped quite a bit by the press as Remington Steele. Well, now that there is an actual face to go with the name, people of course want to work with the real Remington Steele. So she reluctantly has to take him on board the agency for the show, where they solve everything from jewel heists to murder and everything in between. The biggest problem, besides his mysterious identity and past, is that he really has no idea what he's doing, since all his knowledge of crime comes from either his own experience as a criminal or the fact that he's the OG IMDb. That is exactly the perfect way to describe Remington Steele. He knows everything about classic films. Everyone who worked on them, everyone who played somebody on them, all the plots, years of release, and he'll often talk in IMDb entries, comparing the crimes they're investigating to a classic film. And all this is played 100% to perfection by Pierce Brosnan. And I am someone who really, really likes Pierce Brosnan's James Bond, but I like his Remington Steele a little better. It's just he just plays it so well, and he and Stephanie Zimbalist have some of the best chemistry in TV history. It makes it all a joy to watch. He sometimes gets it up when most of the time he will rely on her experience, and it creates an interesting dynamic where in order to keep the public believing in the Remington Steele agency, he has to try and look like he's taking the lead on a case, while really finding subtle ways to turn to Laura every single time to ask, what do we do next? For instance, he has to be told by her that the scene of the crime is their best source of clues. That gives you some idea of what she's dealing with. But there is almost instant attraction between them, which, again, gives a very interesting tension that, for the time. And it all comes together in one of the most enjoyable mystery series I've ever watched. And it's a show that I go back to time and time again just to watch the characters. I mean, there are so many great moments that are just so well written. The dialogue has a sort of classic Hollywood feel to it. There's a lot there. It's clearly made by people who know how to make this sort of thing work. Every character has their own distinct voice, and starting in season 2, they get a new secretary who is played by the mother who is played by Ray's mom from Everybody Loves Raymond. Any kid who grew up in the 90s watched that show with their family, and you know exactly who I'm talking about. And she is actually a lot of fun in this show too. And it has great moments, like for instance, Pierce Brosnan, they find a dead body in an elevator. Pierce Brosnan walks up, touches his neck, and his reaction, while everybody else is arguing and accusing each other, is to just stand up and start walking away and casually say, "I'll take the stairs." And yes, in case you couldn't tell from his James Bond appearances, Pierce Brosnan is actually really, really good at comedy. I mean, he's not a comedian who does, slapstick or anything like that, but he's really good at this sort of subtle character-based comedy. And he and Stephanie Zimbalist will have ways of like just using their faces for an expression that can put a that can put a punk that can put like a punchline on a scene without saying a word. And the whole thing just becomes some of the most fun I have watching TV. And again, I'm really glad this is on Amazon Prime. So check out Remington Steele on Amazon Prime. You won't regret this. This is, in my estimation, what Pierce Brosnan should be remembered for, because this is just him doing great acting work while at the same time appearing in what is a stone cold classic of television. So, see you next week.